Coming up next, Erin Lowry is the broke millennial. She, several years ago, man, she was a force of nature right from the beginning with her first book, Broke Millennial. Of course, Broke Millennial on investing. And then her third book about talking about money and actually having conversations about money. She's got a new workbook out. We're going to ask her questions from the workbook. We're going to dive into the early part of that to see how much we can glean and help get people on the right path with their money. By the way, we did this interview live on Instagram. We did an Instagram live. And so Erin, in one part, gets a little wobbly. So I will apologize ahead of time. But the things that she says in this interview are so good. You're going to love this next 20 minutes. And I'm super happy she's back here with us. It's about time. My favorite person I never feel like I get to talk to enough, Erin Lowry from Broke Millennials here. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Let's talk about you. You write something in the book that surprised the hell out of me. You wrote in, I think it was the second chapter, I have an intense scarcity mindset with money. Where the hell does that come from? And tell me, what does that look like in action?
Well, one of the most common ways it looks like in action for many folks is the desire to hoard money and trouble with spending money. So even on something that you want or might very much align with your value set, it still can be really hard to actually make the commitment to spend. Scarcity mindset, what I find so interesting about it is that a lot of times you hear folks will talk about it because of a way that you grew up. Maybe you grew up in an environment where money was scarce, and therefore you feel this need in your adulthood to hoard it. What's interesting for me is that was not the case. I grew up in a financially stable home, but as my dad will admit, he has a bit of a scarcity mindset around money. So it can also come about a little bit with how a parent might talk about money. And it was never about like, we don't have enough. That's language that I think is very damaging to use, especially with children, because it can, first of all, it can scare them. They don't necessarily have context for what you're talking about. But it could just basically be more about like wanting to oversave, almost wanting to hoard in certain ways, the way that narratives can be spoken about with money. Hard to say if this is nature or nurture. I am very much a delayed gratification person. If you have ever heard of the marshmallow test, I am the person who had no problem waiting for the second marshmallow. If you are not familiar,
you've got 87 marshmallows hoarded in the back of the brain.
Here's the thing. My sister actually really knew how to play the game. So for those of you who are not familiar with the marshmallow test, it's a psychological test that people do usually on like toddlers, maybe 5 years old, where you put a marshmallow or a candy of equivalent value in front of a child and say, if you don't touch this, when I come back, I'll give you a second one. But if you eat it right now, that's it. You don't get a second one. Parent, what is it, like experimental educator, whomever it is, leaves the room, person leaves the room, waits usually like 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how long you want to torture the child. And then you come back. If the marshmallow's gone, they're done. If it's there, they get a second. So my mom did this to us when I was 3, and then again when my sister was 3. I just sat there, waited for the marshmallow. It was fine. My sister picked it up, licked it, put it down, licked it, put it down. So like technically didn't eat it. So she got the second one, but did somewhat enjoy it in the process, which I think is also just
wait a minute. She's like the, I didn't inhale the marshmallow thing.
Yeah.
I would have just licked the marshmallow, but I didn't inhale it.
And it's hard, there's been a lot of talk later about, the validity of the marshmallow test. That's a whole other conversation. But I am somebody who my whole life likes to wait till the end. Like my birthday, I like to open presents at the end of the night. I don't want to open presents at the start of the day. I want to savor everything about an experience like that. And that I think also ties a little bit into my scarcity mindset, where I famously let gift cards go bad. Like I will wait so long to use a gift card that it expires before I use it, because I'm waiting for like the perfect time to use something or to do something, as opposed to just using it. So scarcity mindset can be a bit of a conundrum when it comes to handling your money, because you might think it sounds good because you have save, but if you also don't use it as a tool, it can be a problem.
Well, the reason that surprised me so much about you is because of the fact that you you are somebody who I knew came from a stable background, stable financial background, and that your family didn't have any problems with money. In my family, my dad is a spender, has always been a spender, and I'm exactly the same. I can't have any money in my wallet ever, or it is gone immediately. I would inhale the marshmallow. I don't care about the second marshmallow. The second you set it down, that marshmallow is in my mouth and it is gone. But it's funny how different people are so different, even though you and I both came from very stable places. I think about my twins. We on trips to Disney, I got this great advice: give your kids an allowance, and so that they don't beg, right? Because every ride ends in a gift shop. So give them an allowance every day, and they can either take it all home, they can spend it on one big thing at the end of the trip, or they can spend every day. My son came home with all of his money, Erin, and my daughter every day spent hers about 4 minutes after she got it. And these are twins.
Yeah.
So I think that what you're doing here in the workbook, it seems to me, is kind of hashing through that, right? Because you got to know yourself. Like, I'm the opposite of Dave Ramsey, where Dave says never have credit. If I have any cash in my wallet, what cash isn't accountable. My credit is accountable. So I won't spend money on a credit card, but I will with cash. But I feel like that's kind of what you're doing here with the new workbook.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, money, we all know at this point, is way more psychology than anything else. Like, so much about how we handle our personal finances has to do with how we emotionally relate to money and to our surroundings, right? So if you don't have an understanding of how and why you relate to certain things, then it's going to be really hard for you to figure out a strategy for how to handle your money. So a huge part of Broke Millennial Workbook at the very front is helping you figure out, what do I think about money? Why do I think that way about money? And how is that an asset, but also how might I need to play a little bit of defense with my own mental programming when it comes to finances?
I want to walk through some of the exercises that are in there and some of the findings that you have in there. But before we get there, how long ago did Broke Millennial come out? The first book.
The first one tomorrow will be 6 years old.
That's so amazing. It does feel like
Does it? I think it's 6. 2017.
That's 6. Yes. Hold on.
Yeah.
Fingers, thumbs.
I was like, was it 2016 or 17? The deal was in 16. The book was in 17.
I can't believe that's been 6 years. What is it from that very first book? What was the thing from Broke Millennial that it surprises you that people don't talk about more? Like, there's got to be something you wrote in Broke Millennial where you're like, how come this never got any traction and really should?
Oh, that's a really good question. Oh man, it's hard to know from the first one. I think one thing that surprises me the most, I guess I would say, is how often someone that I know has read the first book will ask me where to put their savings. That, I think, is one that maybe is my biggest, like, I think that, especially in book one, me talking about back then it was 1% APY in a savings account. If your money is at 0.01% APY, you're doing it wrong. Earn money on your savings. Now we're like 3.75. But I do think that the conversation around picking better financial products has improved in the last 6 years. But I do think that conversation still does not get enough traction because a lot of people will talk about the savings rates. Not enough people talk about the other side of, all right, well, where is your checking account? How does that bank behave? How does that bank treat customers who maybe aren't as diligent with their money as you? Like, to me, having conversations around the ethics of banking, it's a tough thread to pull because it's a bit complicated, but it is really important to understand and know who you're banking with, how they treat people, and how they're going to treat you. And let me tell you, if you are not getting well over 1% APY, so interest on your savings account, that is one area where I will say you are, my friend, doing it wrong. We could see some improvement there.
Another area in the workbook you draw attention to where people, I think, are getting it wrong is in credit cards. In fact, in the chapter on credit score, you say that there's this nasty lie that people believe about credit cards. Do you remember what this is? Well, maybe not. That maybe the right word's not lie. Maybe it's just a myth around credit cards.
I mean, it's also an outright lie because it does get perpetuated and it's not true. So, yeah, like I have heard people say to folks that you should carry a balance on your credit card month to month. That is bad advice. It is patently untrue. You do not need to carry a balance over month to month. If you have a balance when your statement comes in, great, then pay it off on time and in full. There's never a need to only pay a little bit or not pay off the whole thing and carry over a balance month to month. This can be a little hard to explain as opposed to visually seeing, but just trust me, when your credit card statement comes in, pay it off on time and in full every single month. You do not need to carry over anything from month to month. It's good to just have a balance to begin with, and then the good deeds for your credit score have been done. Do not pay interest. You do not need to pay interest to grow and develop your solid credit score.
Well, you have a whole chapter then on how to use credit cards that has a funny title, something like, "Oh, this is how I use credit cards." I don't remember exactly, but it's pretty. It's a pretty funny title. How do we use credit cards the right way, Erin?
Well, the number one thing is there's two things I'm going to get into. One, obviously, I'm saying this with full recognition that sometimes people do leverage credit cards when they're in a bind and they do end up in credit card debt. But if we're talking purely from the situation of like best practices for using one, the first step is to know what your credit limit is. So let's say that you can spend $1,000 a month on that credit card. The next step is to not spend more than 30% of your available credit limit. So if you have $1,000 credit limit, we're not spending more than $300 a month on that credit card. That to the credit scoring bureau is like, ooh, so sexy. We do not want to spend more than 30%. Single digits, they're going to be weak at the knees. If you can stay under 10%, they'll be like, oh, can't resist. Must swipe. Yes, absolutely. So keep that in mind. Do not use more than 30% of your available credit limit. Even if you think it looks responsible to like max it out, but pay it off on time and in full, you're never carrying debt. You might think that looks good because you're like, hey, I can use it and I can pay it off. Isn't that great? Not to them. They set the rules. I can't tell you why. They want 30% or less of your available credit limit. The other big key here, do not spend more than you can afford to pay off in a month. And I'm not just saying that flippantly as like, just don't have credit card debt. Credit card debt is a crusher. We are talking for some people upwards of nearly 30% interest rates on these things. So trying to avoid credit card debt, or if you find yourself in credit card debt, aiming to get out of that as fast as possible is really critical, because that is one way that all of a sudden it just gets completely away from you. And it's a debt that can just compound so quickly because the interest rates can be so high.
Well, how do you feel about the credit card reward game?
I use it. That's part of how we went to Japan and had a next vacation. So I do like credit card rewards because it can kind of be seen as like this nice little perk for having healthy credit behaviors, but it only pays off if you do not have debt. Because as soon as you start carrying debt, I promise you those rewards are not going to be worth what you're paying for them. Because again, the interest rates on these cards are often in the high 20s, sometimes even tipping towards 30%. So if you're getting 3%, 5% cash back or, types of points, even if your points are like 10x, it's not going to pay off in terms of how much you're going to be paying in the interest if you're starting to carry credit card debt from it. So I look at that as a little bit of like a next level situation. If you're just learning how to use a credit card right now, don't bother with the rewards game unless it's just easy peasy cash back. Don't get into the whole travel hacking thing until you feel pretty confident with your personal financial situation.
I found that for me that I had to get a healthy respect for cash before I started using the rewards game. Like I went after rewards big time. I messed up my entire financial life, like totally destroyed everything. And then I got a respect for cash. And then Once I got that, then I was able to go back and use rewards. I think that's what you mean by next level, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as soon as you're starting out, or if you're in a situation where you're afraid of credit cards, which some people might be for various reasons, or it could be that you've made a misstep in the past and you're just not confident yet, don't stress about rewards. Just get like a pretty plain vanilla, no annual fee credit card. There are ones out there that offer, like 2% cash back where you don't have to do anything other than pay it off on time and in full and you get the rewards. But yeah, we see all this stuff on Instagram. I get jealous of the people who keep seemingly fly first class like every other month to some exotic destination and then stay at a 5-star resort, apparently for like $7.95. I'm jealous of that too. But I'm also not going to potentially risk my financial life and credit health to be like, ooh, maybe I can get a free first class air ticket.
You end up really paying for it over time and more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
You end the book by talking about financial advisors. What's your take on working with a financial advisor and finding the right one and who should work with one?
Well, I like saying stop at the beginning of that chapter. I did it in the first book and I do it in the workbook because so often people who ascribe to broke millennial, if you feel like you're a broke millennial, then you might get to a chapter about financial advisors and be like, okay, sure. Stop, read the chapter. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, you'd be surprised how diversified the financial advisor industry has become in terms of opportunities to work with somebody to help you on a very specific issue. There are also folks who will just do a one-time plan for a flat fee. It doesn't necessarily have to be a long-term relationship, although those can be very beneficial too. The other thing is it's gone are the days of like, you have to be a millionaire in order to have access to a financial planner. Now, some of the risk though is that financial advisor, financial planner, these are terms that kind of are getting co-opted by a bunch of different people within the financial industry. So you want to make sure you can really vet somebody and understand how credible they are as a financial advisor or planner. One of my favorite recommendations, certified financial planner. It's a bit of a gold standard. You know what they have done in order to get that designation. Also, understand how someone gets paid. This is true across the board with whomever you are working with, right? Like, how does someone make their money? That is a really critical piece of information because if somebody is just flat fee, you pay them an amount of money, they're giving you advice, end of discussion. That's a pretty clear transaction between the two of you. If somebody makes a commission off of advising products to you, then it gets a little bit potentially hairy because the question starts to become, okay, are they telling me a product because it is legitimately the best product for me? Or are they telling me this product because they get a really nice commission on the back end if they sell this to me or if they put this in my investment portfolio? So it is really important that you always ask somebody how they get paid. And if they do work on commission, you need to be really clear on making sure that anything they're recommending that involves a commission is actually in your absolute best interest. And an area that can get really sticky here is when we're talking about insurance policies.
Well, what I love best about what you said, Erin, I loved all of it, frankly, but I really like the fact with it's gotten so difficult, so you got to know what you're looking for first. You can't just go, oh, you're a financial advisor? Okay, well, I heard those are good or those are bad or whatever. There's such a wide range that you really got to truly know what you want first before you even ask any of those fee questions because, you're going to maybe get what you pay for, or maybe not.
Well, the other thing too to consider is if you're just in a situation in your life where maybe you have an inciting incident that requires you to have little help. Maybe you received an inheritance. Maybe you're having a kid. Maybe you're buying a house. There's so many reasons you might want to talk to somebody. You can also go to a lot of different platforms and filter for somebody who has experience in the area that you need help. So if you're somebody who's trying to figure out a debt repayment plan while building wealth and you've got student loans that you want to pay off, well, filter for somebody who has experience with student loans. You don't want to work with somebody who's like, I graduated college 40 years ago and I paid for all my kids to go to school in cash. And I don't really know what the student loan landscape looks like.
And it's also easier now because, it used to be you had to look at the phone book or whatever, look for people in your area. And I think that COVID taught us, it taught us a couple things. Number one, COVID taught us that we can get a financial advisor anywhere now, frankly. And then number
Yeah, absolutely.
number two is, and I want to circle back to something you say earlier on. You also say COVID taught us about emergency funds. And I think I'm going to want to end on that. What did COVID teach you about emergency funds that kind of changed the game for you?
You know, I often get asked where I would change in the prior books because once the book's published and out there, it's pretty hard to change anything that's in it. And there's one thing that I have in book number one, Broke Millennial. And man, if I could get in there and update that. And even pre-COVID, I had changed my mind on emergency funds because I adhered to what a lot of people say, which is you need at least $1,000 in an emergency savings fund if you're paying off debt. I now think that is actively bad advice. It's a great goal. It's a great starting goal. But I know for me that if something went wrong, $1,000 doesn't even pay my rent, isn't going to be enough to keep a roof over my head, isn't going to pay for all my basic needs. So my pivot really became, even if you are paying off debt, my recommendation is you have at least 1 month of bare essential living expenses. So not how much you need to be living your best life, but how much you need to keep your shelter, keep your transportation, put food on the table, pay your basic utilities, your minimums on your debts, because we don't want to destroy our credit during this time. And then also insurance, anything else that's a basic necessity for you. Figure out that number, and 1 month of that is your new bare minimum for your emergency fund. It's going to look really different for different people. The other thing I love, and this is one thing that COVID really taught me certainly, is thinking about our emergency fund beyond just the number that we need in a bank account, but looking at our social safety net. Who do we have that we can turn to in a time of need? Do you have a friend that could quickly get you job interviews? Do you have a family member that you could stay with temporarily? Do you have a cousin who could loan you a car if something happened and you needed to be able to get somewhere and your car is recently broken down and you can't afford to fix it? Is there somebody in your life that can provide childcare? So also ideating around the social safety net version of an emergency fund, I think can also really help bring a level of peace of mind. And then you also have an action plan if and when, inevitably when, something goes wrong at some point.
Because something will go wrong, right? You know,
Yes.
it's so refreshing to hear relationships as assets on your balance sheet, and they truly are. Like all the things that relationships have done for me over my career have been such big things. And I feel like, you know, people talk about relationships as building your quote soft skills, but I don't know much that's much more important than great relationships.
So important. And also, I think knowing what you can provide to somebody else in that time of need, especially if you're somebody who maybe feels that it's difficult to ask for help when you're in a spot of need, just keeping in mind too that at some point you're going to be able to provide some level of a resource, some level of help for someone else as well.
It is the Broke Millennial Workbook, published on the 6th anniversary, I can't believe it, of the original book, Broke Millennial. It's a way to work through all of your financial stuff. I like taking this, like, I don't know how you intended it to go, Erin, but when I looked over it, I thought, if you took one of these chapters, I don't know, like every week, and work through it just a little bit at a time, like you're going to uncover better goal setting. You're going to get your credit in order. You'll get better investment decisions, put better people in your corner. How did you intend for people to use the workbook?
So the only strict advice I have is chapters 1 to 3 really should be done in order, just because they're really the foundational pieces. We're talking a little bit about the psychology of money. We're establishing a common language for certain things we're going to talk about in the future. Beyond 1 to 3, jump around at your interest. You know, I think sometimes everybody approaches things differently. I'm more of the like, I want to get the stuff I'm not interested in done first so I can do the fun stuff later. But if that's not motivating for you, do the fun stuff first. Look to the chapters that are actually interesting to you. Just don't skip the things that feel hard, because that's where the growth is actually going to come from.
And it's available everywhere, correct?
Everywhere books are sold.
Erin, thanks so much for hanging out with us and helping our stackers get better and not be broke. I so appreciate it.
It's always wonderful to be back with you, and this was a ton of fun.